Who doesn't have moments from your past that make you cringe? Who hasn't said, I can't believe I said that? I can't believe I wore that. I can't believe I thought that. I can't believe I did that. You ate dirt. You wanted to be a Ghostbuster. You shoplifted gum. You tried to be a white breakdancer. Plenty of liberals also want to abuse history to control the present. And last month, a scholar named James Sweet caught hell for calling them out for doing just that. He criticized a phenomenon known as presentism, which means judging everyone in the past by the standards of the present. It's the belief that people who lived 100 or 500 or 1,000 years ago really should have known.
All right, buckle up, because what we're about to dive into isn't just a hot take. It's a flamethrower pointed straight at the heart of the woke movement. Bill Maher, the guy who spent decades waving progressive flag, has basically looked at his old political friends and said, yeah, you've lost it. And he's not whispering this in the back of a comedy club. He's shouting it through a megaphone for the whole country to hear. If you've been paying attention, you've noticed Maher's tone shifting for years. This is a man who used to cheer every progressive cause, celebrate every liberal victory, and pile on whenever the mob chose its latest villain. But somewhere along the line, he looked around, realized the mob was starting to look exactly like what it claimed to despise, and decided it was time to slam the brakes before the culture crashed straight off a cliff. And let's be real, we've all had our cringe moments in the past. The fashion choices that should have been a misdemeanor. The childhood dreams that made no sense. Yes, Mom, I really thought I was going to be a Ghostbuster. Maybe even a little gum theft, because you thought being rebellious was cool. We all did dumb stuff. That's not evil. That's just being human, SO. When Maher calls out the insanity of judging people from hundreds of years ago by today's moral standards, what scholars call presentism, he's not defending bad behavior. He's defending perspective. Because the idea that someone living in 1525 should think like you do in 2025, with your iPhone, Wikipedia, and TikTok-fueled moral clarity, that's absurd. But here's the issue. The woke mob doesn't deal in perspective. They deal in absolutes.
The problem is that nobody ever gets canceled for being too woke. So you can say the craziest thing, like men can have babies, and then nobody will, even though people are thinking, well, that's kind of nuts, nobody will say it. They'll just fall in line. Yeah, exactly. That's what I've always thought, men can have babies, sure. I saw a dude who was glowing yesterday, I mean, and that's the problem.
And it's totally insane.
Cowardice.
Yes, it is. It's moral cowardice, isn't it? But
it's intellectual cowardice.
But it also comes from a place of reality, that fear, because they see people around them literally getting cancelled, getting shamed and abused and hounded out of jobs. And they think, I don't want it to happen.
They want to apply 2025's rules to people who lived in a time when soap was a luxury. And it doesn't stop with historical figures. They're dragging those same rules into the present, torching people left and right, no matter the context. Maher's been pounding this drum. Nobody ever gets canceled for being too woke. You can spout ideas so absurd they sound like rejected Monty Python sketches, like men can have babies. And instead of laughing, people just nod along. Why? Because they're terrified. They've seen what happens when you dare to push back. One question, one slip, one bit of resistance, and suddenly you're the villain. Online mobs swarm. Media hit pieces roll out. Careers go up in flames overnight. That's not free speech. That's moral cowardice. And even worse, it's intellectual cowardice.
I can't count the number of stories I've either covered on the show or just read about of professors at colleges, which are supposed to be the bastions of free speech, who said something that was just an opinion.
One guy,
that was
one
different.
Professor in America, he gave a lecture for 25 years about the use of offensive language. And then some students complained about his use of offensive language in the lecture about offensive language. And he had to lose his job. And at that point, I just felt that was peak woke insanity. He literally was lecturing about offensive language and using offensive language to illustrate it.
They have no sense of nuance. They have no sense of context. They just know certain buzzwords or certain concepts are out of limits, off limits, and since social media is just a bunch of mean girls.
It's refusing to ask questions because you're scared of the answers. Maher sees it everywhere. Professors fired for quoting offensive words in a lecture about offensive words. Comedians trimming their sets, terrified of backlash. Entire TV shows rewritten just to please the most hypersensitive corners of Twitter. And the result? A culture where nuance isn't just ignored. It's hunted down and executed in broad daylight. And then there's social media. Oh boy, if the founding fathers had Twitter, half of them would have been canceled before the ink on the Constitution even dried. What was once a digital public square has morphed into a gladiator pit. People don't want debates. They want blood. They want humiliation. And the toxicity? It's bleeding into real life. Now you've got people refusing to date across party lines. Imagine it. You're on a date. Things are clicking. The vibes are good. You're laughing, connecting. Then the question drops. So, did you vote Republican? And just like that, boom, check, please. That's not politics anymore. That's tribalism. And Maher's furious because he remembers what liberalism used to mean. Lifting people up, tolerating differences, fighting for equality without burning the rest of the ground. The woke movement? Maher says it's twisted that legacy into something unrecognizable. It's no longer about progress. It's about catching people in mistakes, shaming them, pretending to be morally superior while solving nothing. He calls it out. Liberalism was meant to elevate, not to destroy, not to fuel white self-loathing, not to rewrite history as endless sin. Yes, America has scars, but fixing them means practical solutions, not weaponizing guilt. And here's the hypocrisy. In the last 70 years, America has made massive strides. Women can vote, own property, run Fortune 500 companies. Civil rights have expanded. Glass ceilings have cracked in business, politics, and sports. Yet the woke crowd acts like we're living in a dystopia worse than Russia or North Korea. It's absurd. You can criticize the president on live TV without vanishing into a gulag, but they insist we're trapped in tyranny. Why? Because admitting progress means admitting they've actually won some battles. And if you've won, what's left to rage against? That's Maher's point. Old school liberalism should be taking a victory lap. But instead, progressives act like acknowledging success makes them less authentic. As a progressive means progress can never be enough. It's pathological. It's in the name, and yet they run from it. And then comes the Trump factor. This is where Maher rips straight away from the left. The endless legal cases, he said outright, they backfired. Dragging Trump into court over Stormy Daniels didn't kill him. It crowned him a martyr. Maher warned it. To Democrats, it looked like justice. To most Americans, it looked like a witch hunt. He said if he'd been advising, he would have told Alvin Bragg, don't do this one. Don't make sex the headline. But they did. And the result? Trump became the most talked about man in America. Again, instead of dousing the flames, they threw gasoline. The legal circus didn't weaken him. It supercharged him. Maher also loves exposing the absurdity of Hollywood. Movies made just 15 years ago by the wokest, most liberal, Democratic donating stars and directors wouldn't survive today. Why? Not enough diversity boxes checked. Not because the story needed it, just because the checklist demanded it. Representation stopped being authentic. It became quota-driven. The art suffered. Characters shoved into score points. Scenes twisted to scream, look how progressive we are. That's not art. That's propaganda. In a costume. Watch a movie from 2009. The cast? White as snow. And back then, no one blinked. These were directors and producers who were darlings of the left. But make that same film today, and Twitter would burn the set to the ground. Hollywood hasn't learned nuance. They've learned to worship at the altar of the checklist. And the casualty? Creativity itself. And it doesn't stop at entertainment. The woke movement has gone after America's own founding legends. Lincoln, Washington, Jefferson, Teddy Roosevelt. Statues toppled, names erased, legacies flattened to a single flaw. Their entire lives judged by their worst sin. As if the freedoms we enjoy today weren't shaped by those same men. It's arrogance at its peak. Judging 1776 with an iPhone in hand, applying today's morals to a world where life itself was brutal. Scholars call it presentism. Judging the past by the standards of the present. And Maher says it's poison. Without historical context, you can't understand progress. Without understanding progress, you can't protect it. Every country has ugly chapters. Slavery wasn't America's invention, it was global. From Sumerians to Romans to African kingdoms to the early United States. Yet the woke act like America dreamed it up in 1619. That's not history. That's activism dressed up as education. And Maher doesn't sugarcoat it. Yes, Columbus committed atrocities, but people back then, they were atrocious. Everyone who could afford a slave had one, including people of color. Slavery wasn't the exception, it was a rule. Egyptians, Greeks, Arabs, British, Americans, it spanned the globe. Pretending it was unique to America is historical fraud. Maher's message is simple. You can acknowledge past horrors without erasing the people who shaped the present. You can demand equality without killing free speech. You can chase change without tearing the country into a cultural war zone. But the woke movement doesn't want balance. They want purity tests, ideological conformity, control of the narrative. And Maher, he's not playing along. His shift to the center isn't about becoming conservative. It's about saying, enough, too far. Because here's the truth. If you let fear, arrogance, and historical amnesia run the culture, you don't just lose your humor. You don't just lose creativity. You lose the very foundation that made progress possible. And when that collapses, it doesn't matter what side you're on. Everybody loses. So maybe the real question isn't why Bill Maher is speaking out now. The real question is, why isn't everyone else?